and Stouffer, and they lived in Rocky River, and so one thing led to another, and we vacationed together. We were on the board of directors together, and he was secretary, and Ken, you know, we all have shortcomings, but Ken was a marvelous, marvelous person, Christian, dedicated only the right way. I mean, he wouldn't deviate from right to wrong for any reason, and he just knew that. I mean, he didn't drink. They were Christian Science. He wouldn't drink, and we would kid him and everything else, and had a lot of fun. He'd serve you a drink, but that was not his religion, and he believed in that. So that's good. We also went, not Lakewood Country Club, but he was inaugurated into the Olmsted Falls Athletic Hall of Fame as a football player. Now, if you think Lakewood Country Club was in the country, you can imagine where Olmsted Falls was in the mid-30s. My goodness gracious! I mean, but. He went to Cornell and played football at Cornell, and he played on the national championship football team. That isn't bad. Played for then after the war and a few interruptions, like the minor interruptions like a war. Played for the inaugural season with the Buffalo Bills, and also organized their 50th reunion, which would have been in '46. That'd be 96 of a reunion of the original players that formed the first effort by Buffalo to get into the NFL. In those days it was the All-America Conference, but anyways, and then they were out, and then they finally came in later on. So he was an organizer, and you gave Ken as they say, you gave Ken a job. If it was flat rocks in a stream, you could figure that he's going to turn every one of those flat rocks over to find that crayfish. I mean, that's just the way he was. Great, you know, Ken, and a lot of tremendous fellas here. Golly, I mean, and ladies. I mean, there was marvelous fellowship.
Was Ken not responsible for beginning some of the tournaments that we now know today?
Oh yes, of course the primary one was the Lakewood Westwood Jamboree, and he thought that was a good idea on it, and it took off, and actually it's settled down a little bit now, but it used to be in our time when that announcement came out that the Lakewood, or the Jamboree, I mean, the Jamboree will be played on, let's say, Friday and Saturday, June 21 and June 22nd, you had to get that money and card in pronto, or you weren't going to be on the list. They only took 100 teams. That was 200 players. That meant 400 people for dinner, and that's capacity even at Westwood. Far we had them stashed out in those fireside rooms. But anyways, that was the deal. Get it signed up and get onto it. And I can remember my buddy Don Moore says, "I'm going out of town." I said, "I'll cover it, and get it hand delivered so that you were on the list, so that you weren't left out." Because that tournament, and maybe I'm an old guy talking, and kind of too bad now. When you played in that, and the people came out, there'd be a cocktail hour here, and then there'd be the Westwood banquet. And you knew everybody. You knew everybody, and everyone dressed to the finest. And there'd be a playoff, and there'd be like a Cleveland Open of people following this thing around. So that was probably one of the major endeavors. He had other. He always had an idea to do something. He first got me involved with, we ought to have a veterans tournament. And I said, "What do you mean? I'm not a veteran." I mean, he said, "Well," he says, "Armistice Day is like the 11th of November. We ought to have a golf tournament. On the 11th of November, a golf tournament." I said, "Okay, I'll do it," and everything else. So I put my wits about me and everything, and gee, I was thinking half of our golf course is sort of north of the stream and everything, and the other half is on the south side of that stream. We could have a sort of a Civil War replica of this thing and have a blue and gray. So we got Charlie Lott, Barbara cut the flags, you know, just zipped them through the sewing machine. You know, 9 gray flags and 9 blue flags, little triangles or square ones, and put on the thing. So we had the blue and the gray tournament. And then I started doing some arithmetic, and our number 14 hole, 598 yards or something, but you can multiply that by feet, and you can come up with 1,776 feet. So I said, we're going to play that thing from 1,776 feet, which was, it felt right within those parameters on the thing. And then Stoff says, well, we'll put a 6-foot diameter circle around the hole. And when it gets in that 6-foot diameter, he says, we'll get a prize on this Veterans Day thing and everything. So, yeah, that's great. Charlie, put that circle around that thing. Well, he said, and is this you gonna edit this, or is this gonna be correct? Well, anyways, it ends up, you get out there and Stoff comes running, and he says, you've been to the 14th hole? I says, no, I haven't been there. He says, well, that circle around that flag, after 1,770, is like a pea hole in the snow. He said, trying to hit that thing. 6-foot circle, only 3 feet on either side of the stick.
Sounds great, but it's not.
On the thing. And of course, the meal for the thing, you could get chipped beef on toast or Navy bean soup. That was the whole thing. And we're out here. Well, actually, it turned out being a pretty good day for November. You know, usually you had, so that was one of his endeavors. That was, come on, we got to cap off the season. You know, if it isn't anything else, we'll just have the banquet, the chipped beef and toast and the Navy bean soup on it. So, but he always had some squirrely idea. Incidentally, going back to the jamboree. Okay, we got the jamboree and it's a success and everything else. He said, I think what we ought to do next year, then, you know, he says, we ought to take the the club champion at Westwood and the club champion at Lakewood. And for the shotgun bang, this starts our 5th jamboree. They would tee off, and suppose the first round's at Westwood, they would tee off on Bradley Road. Now, mind you, Bradley Road, drive the ball down to the median strip on I-90, play the ball all the way down the median strip, all the way up the Westwood Drive, and then they'd shoot off the cannon. And the median strip, just a field anyways. They'd be 5 days trying to find the ball and do the rest, far less how many windshields would be broken in the thing and the whole thing. Well, we didn't do that one.
Great idea, but oh my gosh, oh, that's super. After some of the individuals who came about and did some great contributions to the extension of membership and enlightenment for the members, there were probably events that were in your time frame when you were president, and you were on the board for what, 6 years?
6 years, yeah.
Right. And tell us about your tenure when you maybe from not only the presidency but from the board, those 6 years.
Yeah, well, for whatever it is, are times when you don't aspire to be president. At least I didn't. I was willing to serve. Sal Marino asked me to be on the board and everything. I said, gee, there's probably other people. No, we want you on the board now. I said, okay. So that would work. We had a very good board. I'm telling you, we had some tough times, but I mean, we had people that were dedicated to make this thing work and grow this organization here. And we had some, I say Charlie Lott was in his heyday planting trees. He always had his little tractor. You could always see Charlie on that little case tractor that he'd love to sit on every evening and everything else. But anyways, I'd have to say we had a terrific board. The guys that I came on with were Randy Palmer and Clint Greenleaf and myself. Clint was no slouch. I mean, he was a very bright, successful person. And Bob Oakley was, of course, with White Motor. They were having some tough times, but Bob had a terrific mind too, and what was trying to be done, and did a great job. Harv Malig, managing partner of Pete Marwick, an attorney and accountant, a good tennis player, a good guy to play golf with and everything, good friend. I mean, they were some bright people. I mean, I'm telling you, and I'm probably leaving out a few names, but and Clint became president. We met at Bearden's. He says, okay, now what, Don, what are we going to do? I was vice president. He said, what are we going to do? Well, we'll do this, and we'll see what we can do, and what do you want to do? And we had no problem, you know, staffing the committees. I mean, some of them were tougher. Entertainment was tougher because it was a longer season for it. Golf and greens and that were pretty well taken care of. But anyways, we had a very cooperative board. John Packle came on, and part of my tenure, Bob Cook, Bob Given. I'm trying to think who the other ones were. But anyways, they were a good board, and we did achieve things. The big thing that we had to do was keep the membership up. That was always a problem. That thing had dropped down to 245 people, and after the golf season, and we'd be beating the drums to get new members. I mean, and trying to hold on to the ones that we had. So we would get up to 280. That's when 275, 280 was the max on the thing. It wasn't the 300. And get people in, and of course then you'd lose some in the fall of the year. So it was always a struggle to keep that membership up. And it's sort of like the tale of two cities, is the best of times and the worst of times, because when we brought in new members, we got initiation fees, and that let us do capital expansions and build things and buy things. We had more mowers and everything else. And we could try to operate on the dues structure. And if it didn't, we could fall back on some of that initiation fees to cover the shortfall. So we didn't have any assessments as such. We sort of had to bite into our surplus. So as I say, as you brought new members in, you sort of got a cash rich on one end, and you were kind of losing on the other side of it. But we struggled with that and made it work, and did do capital. We did a lot of capital improvements in those 6 years that I was here working on that, and continuing after it. We acquired land, sold land, and
tell us about that. That's always interesting. How
well, that gets into a little controversy. Jim Carney was a member here, and Pete Kleiss belonged at Westwood, and Carney and Kleiss, and they owned half of Westlake. Now that's an exaggeration, but I mean, they started down at I-90 and headed up towards Center Ridge, buying every little farm and everything else that was available. And they decided that they maybe could buy the piece of land that was on the other side of Hilliard Road that Lakewood owned. You know, originally Hilliard Road didn't go through, so we got bisected with that, I'll say 20 acres that was over there, 23 acres, I think. And so anyways, Carney had come to the board and said we'd be willing to buy that. Well, that got some people in a stir, and I won't mention names, but no, that's going to be worth a lot of money, and we'll have a Standard Oil station there, and this will happen, and we'll all be rich. And then we'll build condominiums and all this stuff. Well, that didn't happen, but before it didn't happen, there was some very hard feelings, because some of these people got pretty obnoxious with Jim Carney. I mean, to Kleiss didn't make any difference. He's down at the other place. But I mean, they would hit on Carney, you know, and tell him what's wrong with him and what you're trying to do, and you're trying to make money, and you're this and you're that and everything else. So they pulled the deal. I mean, they said, it's over. So time marched on and everything, and Clint was president, and I played golf with Jim, and let me just tell you, smart man. I mean, you don't get where you are, or Kleist, you don't get where you are with being dumb. I mean, you can be dumb and be lucky once, but not on the long tenure. So I was playing golf, and this is probably 7 or 8 years. I'm taking a stab at that. And I said to Jim, I said, any chance of resurrecting this thing? He says, I will not get involved in it. He says, I come out here to play golf and be with my friends. And and the thing, and he says, I'm not going to go through that whole thing. I got other things to do with my life. I said, well, I said, if he says, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll talk to Pete and see what he says, and if he'll run with the ball as such and do things, he says, that'll be fine. But he says, I will not get involved in it at all, whether you do or you don't. Well, that was a break, because I knew Pete from Sunday school, taught Sunday school. He knew my father very well. I knew him. He bowled with our church league, and of course Pete's a hard nose, but we had ties. And Jim said, Pete will listen to you. So, and I can remember this. It was Harv and myself, and I think Harv Maylig,
Okay.
and Clint went in to talk to him in his office and see what we could do about getting rid of that land and acquiring land. And they owned a little parcel, well, back of our number 6 hole. Those were 5-acre parcels. And he said, well, we don't own any more. He said, but I think we can get some more land. So we went back to the, and I'll tell you this, I mean, this is subterfuge, but we went back to a majority of the board. I don't want to say people we had in our pocket, but because you can't announce these things. I said, they're willing to see what they can do. Now, are you 5 guys willing to go along with it? Well, we had still Oakley on the board and everything, and they said yes, and Cook, and so, oh, Cook wasn't on at that time, but anyways, so I said, okay, you go with it, because we had to have the vote. I mean, we couldn't go through the whole thing as that we changed our mind. So, Pete, and I'm sure Jim too, on a lesser scale, but there wasn't any word made, and they started buying up the land behind us on number, what's now 8, and 9T and everything. And they got one parcel, 5 acres, and they got a little less than that because Hilliard cut it off. And they got 2 more parcels, so we had 15 acres. We were trying for the 3rd one, and by that time I was off the board, but we still had the votes, because then Cook came on and we kept him informed on the thing, and he says, and Clay said, I think we better just put this thing to bed and take what we can get. If that other parcel comes up, you can buy it, or we'll see what'll happen, but it isn't going to happen in the next year or anything else. It just isn't there. So we announced at the board meeting that this is what we had done. Not, we still had to get the votes. I mean, there's no vote on this thing. Well, that got people up in a little bit of a stir, and said, well, so we'll go. I said, well, we're going in there, and we're going to meet with Pete Kleist, and this is what we're going to do, and it's going to come up for a vote on the board. So we went in there, and of course I said, well, we're not getting enough money, and a few guys and everything else, and some people mad, everything, because you didn't inform us. We had a land and taxes committee. We didn't use them. That's not right, but I mean, that's what happened. And so they got talking this and that, and we should get more. But then we're going to sell whatever the difference in acreage. We would get remuneration, or one way or the other, on what the land was going for in there, which was $3,000 an acre or something like that. So sat down, and some guys, boys, man, we got to get this. And Pete listened. He says, well, he says, I'll tell you, this is the deal. You either take it or you don't take it. They didn't care. I mean, they could use the land. And he says, we're not renegotiating. We've already did this 3 years ago, or 4 years ago. So he says, it's up to you people. And he says, this is what we have. And of course, we went back to to our board meeting, and it was voted through, and we set up. Now, we did do some little rinky-dinky things too, because I told him, I said, okay, we're coming down number 6 and everything, and it's square.